Hybrid meetings are weird. Some participants have access to rich, non-verbal communication channels like subtle body language cues from the people around them, while everyone else in the meeting appears like they're on TV. But other participants just get a thin, cropped, slightly laggy stream of information from everyone else in the meeting, and even less from the tiny figures who are sitting together around tables in the physical meeting rooms. Leading a hybrid meeting means leading in-person and virtual participants down wildly different paths to the same goal at the same time. The techniques you use to capture, hold, and direct attention will differ depending on where you are relative to everyone else in the hybrid meeting. If you're the only person on a screen and everyone else is in the room together, you'll find it easier to get their attention than if you're only one of many tiny virtual faces on a big screen, but not as easy as it would be if you're in the same room with participants. Either way, you might struggle to direct lively in-room discussion from the screen, or even to get a word into the rapid flow of conversation. It can be hard to command attention through a virtual channel when most of the action for participants is in the real world, and you're the thinnest source of information in the room. On the other hand, you might not know how you'll appear or sound to participants joining from a physical room. You might be a huge head on a massive screen with your voice booming from the ceiling for one group. For another group, you might just be a faint image on a laptop screen, barely more than a silhouette in a brightly lit room, and hard to hear through a tiny speaker. It's a good idea to gather some intelligence about the relative weight of your presence in various rooms if you can, so you can calibrate your behaviour appropriately. But often you won't have any idea how participants see you or each other, because their own technology setup can be such a big factor. Sometimes it's impossible to make your verbal and body language work for everyone, especially if you're in the room with some participants and only a tiny speck in a single meeting room camera feed for others. Any body language that seems natural to people in a room with you will be imperceptible for virtual participants who only have a narrow view through a small window. But any gestures big enough to translate through the camera might seem wildly over the top for participants in the room. On the other hand, if you appear as just one of many individual camera feeds, any body language big enough to be noticed by in-person participants might seem comical to people watching you closely on their own device. I try to aim for something in the middle and signal why I'm acting strangely if I need to do something completely over the top. For example, if I need a really big gesture to get the attention of virtual participants, I'll ostentatiously orient myself towards the camera so in-person participants instinctively understand that I'm projecting to the virtual audience. Participants in hybrid meetings tend to be highly distractible. Virtual participants tend to be even more at risk of multitasking in hybrid meetings than they would be in wholly virtual meetings, partly because it's so easy for them to feel excluded from the interactions between the in-person participants. Meanwhile, the in-person participants are hugely at risk of distracting each other and disengaging from the virtual participants, especially from their contributions in sub-channels like a chat window. Directing attention in hybrid meetings is an uphill battle, but there are steps you can take to give your meeting a fighting chance against the forces of mass distraction. Try leveling the ground. Insist that in-person participants follow the same rules as virtual participants, like requiring anybody who wants to speak to raise their hand and wait to be called on, whether they're in the room or on the screen. Leading with the thinnest channels. Figure out, as best you can, which participants will struggle most to make themselves heard by most participants, and call on them first. Being direct, really direct. You can't rely on subtle cues because at least some of the participants probably won't pick them up, so just own the awkwardness and give clear directions, even if it feels a little abrupt. Reinforcing ground rules. Police the rules more consistently than you might in either a wholly virtual or face-to-face meeting. For example, if a group of in-person participants is distracting themselves with a muted side conversation, remind them that we're having just one conversation. Perhaps with a gentle reminder like, I think there are a few competing conversations going on. Let's just stick to one at a time. We're hearing from Mary right now. Go ahead, Mary. Being a role model. Participants will look to you to manage the meeting, and if you let yourself get distracted or let part of the group dominate your attention unduly, then participants will do the same. Hybrid meetings can be exhausting and often frustrating. It always feels like everything is slower and more difficult than it needs to be. But despite that frustration, I find the best approach is to try to understand how each participant will experience the meeting and try to tailor my approach to meet their needs, and to set and diligently enforce the ground rules, like raising a virtual hand or posting in the chat to get attention. Good luck with your next hybrid meeting, and thank you for watching.